Hello, class. So, for World History today, we're going to talk about the lead up to the French Revolution. Now, how it typically goes when it comes to world history classes is that when we get to the French Revolution, we haven't actually talked about France in a while. We may have been talking about Louis the Sun King as his absolute monarchy status, but we haven't seen France in a while. But France at this point is basically an absolute monarchy. Okay? The power comes from the king and his court. There is very little semblance of any type of democracy. And this is going to change like relatively quickly once the revolution occurs. So there are these general ideas of the long-term causes of the French Revolution. And then there's some more of like the short term, like what was the spark that made 1789 such a deal. So long term, we can look at the expenses of the king and queen. The king and queen of France, and it's not just Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. There are predecessors like this as well. Had ridiculously lavish lifestyles. And especially when you consider how poor the average person in France was, they are spending a very large percentage of the tax base on themselves, on building lavish palaces, on Versailles. And there's not this check that England has from Parliament. So the extremely expensive lifestyles of the current king and queen and those that came before them. Okay. Part of it is the cost of war. Okay, so two aspects to this. There is that the French lost the 7 Years' War. In America, we mostly refer to that as the French and Indian War from our perspective. But it's one of the first global conflicts, and they're going to lose that. It's going to cost them a lot of money. Then they're going to help in the American Revolution. And it's more of an enemy of my enemy is my friend idea. Right? They don't like Great Britain, so they can help the United States. But even in victory, this was a very expensive war for the French to be a part of. In the long-term causes as well, we can look at the unfair tax system. Okay, so France is divided up into 3 estates, and this is going to be relevant in just a little bit. But you have the first estate, which is the church and the membership of the church. They're very wealthy. The church owns a ton of land in pre-revolutionary France. And they basically paid no taxes. They have the second estate, the nobles, that are very wealthy. And they paid almost no tax. So then you go to the majority of the population, the third estate, the peasants, the poor people. They have the smallest amount of money, but they are paying the largest amount of taxes. So it is inherently unfair. It's designed to be unfair because the threat to the king's power, traditionally is thought to be, is that he has the backing of the church and the backing of his nobles. And so keeping them happy with very little taxes is a good plan for them until the third estate has any type of power. This goes into this. There are Enlightenment ideas. Okay. The Enlightenment has, among intellectuals, hurt the old ideas. Okay, that the king was divinely appointed by God, therefore you could never question him. And these Enlightenment ideals that are spilling over the Atlantic to the United States founding fathers, they still exist in France. And so you're going to see people that are from a very privileged upbringing have somewhat noble ideas about equality being pushed. Those are some more nebulous long-term effects. Then why is it happening in 1789? There are some more short-term effects here. One is American independence, what we've already kind of talked about. But 1789 is also when George Washington was sworn as president of the United States. And so you have a successful example of mostly elite intellectuals, men making a republic and getting rid of a king and doing it quite successfully. Right then. Also, people are upset. So the peasants are used to bearing a lot of the tax burden. But then you have, right before it, there's some terrible weather. Okay? The climate is here. There's poor harvest and high bread prices. So it's simply hard to feed your family. And then you still want to have the elites on your side. Okay? They can call a possible peasant rebellion. There was a financial crisis in the 1780s in France. They're running a huge deficit. Their stock markets are basically crashed. So even the wealthy groups are going to be upset. And so the actual powder keg here, okay, the thing that's going to launch the thing going, is the calling of the Estates General. France, unlike the United Kingdom, does not have a regular parliament. They do have an Estates General. And the Estates General, like the tax system, is inherently unfair. Okay, and set up in the same way. Here, the first estate, this is the Catholic Church. Okay, and they have 303 delegates for their 100,000 Catholic clergy in France. So that means roughly they get one representative for every 330 clergy. There's the second estate, which gets 282 delegates for the 400,000 nobility and landowners in France. So that's roughly one delegate per 1,418 nobles. And then you get the third estate, which is 578 delegates for the 25 million commoners in France. So that's one delegate per 43,253 commoners. But it's actually worse than this, because the amount of delegates you have is not really that important. Because you might be looking at that and being like, well, there are a combined 585 delegates in the first two estates. The third estate has 578. So with third estate, the commoners could convince a couple of priests to come over to their side. They might be able to pass something. But it isn't how it works. Each estate gets one vote. So if someone gets the majority in the third estate, say everyone in the third estate, all 578, voted they wanted this provision. Then you have the other two estates. And the first estate votes to say no, and the second estate votes to say no. That's 2 against 1. It's done. Okay, and so this is how it been. So in 1788, the French government is so bankrupt that a new tax was proposed to be paid by all. And privileged members of society were not going to be exempt. So the demand of States General is the first time this happened since 1614. Now, the Third Estate deputies made a decision to call themselves the National Assembly and claim the right to speak for the nation. So it goes off the rails really early on, and which the people representing the Third Estate are going to say, we represent the people, we're the National Assembly, we're the real one. And they invite people from the other estates to come, and there are some nobles that come, and there are some priests that come. And so they intend to make laws without royal approval, and to continue until all the work is done. And again, the king just wants them to show up, approve the taxes, and leave. So they're doing this at Versailles, and they come to work for the next day, and the Third Estate has been locked out. They've been locked outside. And it's his ingenious plan by the king. Hey, well, if they can't get in, then they just can't do their work. Well, Versailles is really big, so they start wandering around, and they find a tennis court. Because, of course, it's a very hoity-toity type place. And they go and they take an oath at the tennis court that the National Assembly is going to stay in session until everything has been done. They will not be thwarted by the king. So this is a picture of a painting from this area about this tennis court. Oh, so it's going to blow up there. So this is on like the political side, where the king is kind of losing it against these people. What we'll get to in next time is the action on the streets. Whereas, like, Louis may have been able to work with it and contain it if it was only the members of the National Assembly. But the people of Paris are going to start rising up, and the revolution is going to continue in a bloodier way that the American